for a leap forward. That is what some are saying. But before we get into who said what do you think about maybe the Broncos taking a baby step back here in 2025 as they were a bit ahead of schedule maybe this past year before taking a quantum leap here into the future?
Oh, Zach, I don't like you even talking about it. I don't like you even saying we could take a step back, but it lives in reality. That's something that can happen. Look at the Houston Texans. Houston Texans had a great first year with C.J. Stroud.
Yeah.
The second year 2 for C.J. Stroud, wasn't as good as the first year. They were still able to get to the playoffs, passed the first round, got to the second round, got beat. So if that's a step back we're taking, I'll take it. But if it's like, hey, you guys are only going to win 7 games, like that's going to hit me pretty hard. Just because I just have so much excitement built up for this team next year. Like, I'm hoping that Bo Nix could take that next step. I'm hoping that the Bayleys of the world, the Troy Franklins, they can take another step. I'm hoping that Sean Payton can take another step in calling plays.
Sure.
I don't see us regressing. I don't see us taking a step back, and maybe it's just because I refuse to see that. And if we do take that step back, how does it look? Are we still 9? Do we win 9 games? Or is it like, hey, you guys won 7 and you're out the playoffs?
Right. Well, no, that's a good question. What would represent a step back? Is it are we now to the point, serious question, is it like the Broncos went to the playoffs 1 year after an 8-year drought? And I'm seriously asking the question, is it like playoffs or bust to what's acceptable around here right now?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That is really fair. The only thing that I can say, okay, I can accept it if we don't make the playoffs is if we're not healthy. It happens. We've been lucky as the Broncos.
Though.
I know.
Not with Sean's system. No.
Sean's putting bad juju in the air. But if we don't stay healthy, we are not going to make the playoffs. That's any team. But if we stay healthy and we still don't make the playoffs, I'm going to be a little upset. I'm going to be upset because we have the quarterback. You have some players. The defense did really well last year. Hopefully they can do well again. You have a Defensive Player of the Year winner in PS2.
Yeah.
So the only way we can go is taking another step forward. I'm not taking another step back. I'm going to be upset if we do.
All right. I think there's a scenario where the Broncos can take a step back on paper, but not take a step backward in reality. We'll get to that here in just a couple minutes, but I want to pay off, who said what we said going into the commercial break a few minutes ago. So ESPN, this is the reason we're asking this question. So ESPN had a group of analysts pick next year's Super Bowl matchup, pick next year's league MVP, pick a team that will break out, and a team that will take a step back, okay? And you can go check that out at ESPN.com. I actually think there's a paywall. I think it might have been an ESPN Plus article. Don't quote me on that. But it was Seth Walder who picked the Broncos to take a step back in 2025. He said, quote, "The simplest way to pick a regression candidate is to look for teams with elite defenses and mediocre offenses. It's just so hard to repeat defensive success year after year, and Denver ranked only 15th in EPA per play on offense. Yes, Bo Nix might progress in year number 2, but he also might not," with an exclamation point, end quote. What do you make of that? That the Broncos are an easy candidate for regression because they're a team with an elite defense, a mediocre offense, and the defense is hard to replicate in a way that they did this past year.
That is true. When you have to count on a defense every single year, it's not going to work out for you every single year. The good thing about the Denver Broncos is you're bringing back your defensive coordinator. You're bringing back majority of your defensive players and offensive players, and now you can build off of that. We have more money to go out there and make a couple splashes. They don't have to be big ones. A defensive tackle, a safety to help our defense out. Then we can use the rest of it in the draft to put weapons around Bo Nix. Therefore, for me, it's like I can't see the Denver Broncos taking a step back as long as the defense is doing their thing, and they're going to continue to do it because now it's their 3rd year with Coach Vance Joseph. That means that they're going to be a lot more comfortable. That means that Vance Joseph can be a little bit more detailed, come up with more creative schemes, more blitz packages, because he trusts some of the players in the room more than he did before. You have Riley Moss that should take another step forward, right? It's going to be his 3rd year. Pat Surtain's going to be the same Pat Surtain because he works hard. If we can add a couple more pieces, inside linebacker, defensive tackle, that helps you out so that you can maintain a top 10 defense. and then you can have fun on the offensive side and use the money that you do have to go and get a couple of talented playmakers.
So top 10, because the Broncos were a top 5 defense this year.
They were.
And number 1 in a lot of categories. I can't believe they had 63 sacks this season.
It's insane.
That is psychotic. Number 2 in the NFL was the Ravens with 54. A 9-sack difference between number 1 and number 2 is pretty dramatic.
And that's why I said top 10, though. It's hard to be top 5 every single year. Zach.
Right. Because do you agree that well, let me not ask if you agree. Let me just ask the question. Do you think the defense played over their head this year?
Yes, they did.
They overachieved?
They did. Can you agree that, did you think that the defense was going to do as well as they did?
No.
I didn't either.
No.
So for the defense to put up 63 sacks and had the success and was the biggest reason why the Denver Broncos were able to win early, like that's like, yeah, they played over their head. But that's who I'm expecting every single year now because they can do it. They can do it. They showed that they can do it. Now you have to go out there and be consistent with it. And so I'm going to hold them to a higher standard. Top 10 at least.
Top 10.
Top 10.
So top 5 may not be as sustainable. Top 10. And then you're hoping that while you maintain a top 10 defense, your offense is only getting better.
Yes.
We got to remember how slow starting the Broncos offense was this year. It was really, really bad there in the month of September. Well, it's not only Seth Walder of ESPN. I'm reading something different this past weekend from CBS Sports, who picked 5 teams poised to take a step back in 2025. It was teams like the Vikings, the Steelers, the Commanders, the Broncos. And here's what they said, quote, replicating the number 1 pass rush from last season will be very difficult, especially from a team that finished with 63 sacks and 5 players who had 5 or more sacks this season. The Broncos need more production from their running backs and better blocking up front to take the pressure off Bo Nix as well. The Broncos don't have a brutal slate in terms of a schedule, but will face the Houston Texans, Philadelphia Eagles, and Washington Commanders all on the road, along with the Chiefs and Chargers still in division. Winning 10 games is possible for Denver, but it will be tough for the Broncos to match the win total and go back to the playoffs, end quote. I'm going to be honest. I don't think some dramatic step back is going to happen this year for the Denver Broncos. But if I were tasked with the same exercise that CBS Sports had their guys do and ESPN had their guys do as well, I think there's a reason why the Broncos would pop up in a list like this. Because I'm looking at the Vikings. Do I think the Vikings overachieved this year and could take a step back? Yeah, I do. The Steelers were on this list. Do I think the Steelers overachieved this year and could be taking a step back? I do. The Commanders, are the Commanders going to go 12-5 again? They could take a step back. I could see that. So I think it's reasonable. I don't think this is like a hot take.
But come on, Zach, come on. That it's reasonable for any team. I'm going to give you an example. The 49ers. The 49ers were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago now, right? Or is it a year ago?
This is last year.
Last year.
Against the Chiefs, yeah.
This year, they didn't even make the playoffs because of injuries, because of selfishness. People wanted to get paid more. You had Brandon Ayuk that wanted more money that missed a lot of time.
Yep.
Deebo Samuel, all right, wanted more money, and he wasn't the same version of himself as he was the year before. Christian McCaffrey couldn't stay healthy. So that could happen to anybody. Any team could regress when you deal with injuries or it doesn't go your way. That's the beauty in the NFL. It's because 1 year is not – you have 1 year. The next year is going to be a totally different
so
team.
True. It is.
You know, and that's why Sean Payton made that statement, like every year you got to flip the puzzle piece back over and pretty much redo certain aspects of your roster, and every game takes on its own identity. And so that's why for this exercise, I understand and I agree in certain situations, but you can say that for every single team.
Sure.
The Kansas City Chiefs,
sure.
The Philadelphia Eagles. So, like, that's why for me, I don't feel like the Denver Broncos are going to take a step back. They're only going to take another step forward because of the quarterback they have.
Okay.
Some more money that they can spend so they can get a couple more playmakers.
Right.
All right, the defense is still intact, and you have your defense and offensive coordinator back. Now, are they going to have to prove that they can beat teams with a winning record? Yes, that's going to be the next step is playing tougher talent and winning those games. But I have all the faith in the world right now in Sean and what he's doing, and they're going to take a step forward. Now, it may not be 10 games. It may be 9 games, you get into the playoffs, but we have a run game now. It's certain things like that. Of course, I would want 11 games, 12 games. It's hard to do. But if you're a wild card team and you've done a great job of getting a running back and you have a run game going into the playoffs, that's a step forward for the Denver Broncos.
So I like where your head's at in terms of a step forward, because I do believe there is – we want everything measurable. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. It's totally normal, because I suffer with it as a fan as well. Improvement means more wins, and more wins only. And I do think there exists some space between that the record is the same or even worse, and the Broncos take a step forward. I do, and I know that's not going to hit the ears of someone maybe driving down, I-25 right now and saying I don't make sense. But you bring up the record against teams that were good. Can we just say it like that?
Yeah.
Teams that were good. You went 1-8. Every other one of the 9 wins were teams that either lost, teams that lost more games than they won. There's no more 8-8. It used to be like they finished 500 or worse. No, you're either a winner or a loser in today's NFL.
That's the world.
And maybe that will change when they go to 18 games and 9-9 will be 500, which is just sounds so weird.
Please no 18 games.
But like if you are, instead of 1-8 in games against winners, you are 5-4 against winning teams.
Tell me this: do you still make the playoffs? 5-4 against winning teams. That's great.
And I'm saying a 9-8 record.
9-8 record. So you might make the playoffs. You might not.
Oh man, because when you put the shoe on that foot, it's like, okay, you have a 5-4 record against winners in this scenario. That means you lost to some teams that you weren't supposed to as well. Yeah. And that was the business that the Broncos took care of this year. They had more blowouts this year than you got to go back to basically a decade earlier, 2014, to find a Broncos team that blew out opponents the way that they did this year. Now, they were bad, but still, the Broncos just hadn't done that in many years. Man, it would feel hollow in terms of this conversation. Would it be a step forward if you went 5-4 against teams with a winning record?
Yeah.
But finished 9-8 and missed the playoffs? Because it'd be less wins and you'd miss the playoffs in a way that you didn't this past year, despite even the 1-8 record against winners.
So, with that being said, it's all about still winning. You have to be able to win. If you don't win, all right, and you don't make the playoffs, Zach, because that's the ultimate goal. We play these games, the sports, to win. I know it's not the only thing. It builds character in your building, and you have a young team like the Denver Broncos, and it's going to come. But when you have a quarterback that takes you to the playoffs and wins 10 games, his first year,
right?
That's expected almost every single year.
Oh, I would just say be careful with that.
If they're healthy. Can I at least say that?
Oh yes, no, of course. That goes with every team. I agree.
I mean, think about the Kansas City Chiefs. They've won every single year. Not always the Super Bowl. It seems like it, but they're in it every single year. Mm-hmm. Why? Because you have the quarterback. Because you have the offensive coordinator. I'm expecting that here with the Denver Broncos because we have the quarterback. Sean, I'm expecting Sean to get to the next level with his play calling abilities like he was with the Saints. So although you can lose like one more game, 9-8, and still do some really good stuff for the season, like get a run game, it's all going to come down to, do you still make the playoffs? Do you still make the playoffs?
So there's not a scenario for you, and not to put words in your mouth, I'm just asking questions. So there's not a scenario where it could be viewed as the Broncos take a step forward and miss the playoffs.
No. They have to be in the playoffs.
What about, let me just pitch a scenario. We'll paint a picture for you. Broncos are 9-8.
Yeah.
Okay. Second winning season in a row. We would have all took 9-8 in August leading up to this season.
We would. But we ended with 10 games.
That's right.
So we won more.
Yep. and you don't apologize. Even for week 18, you don't apologize.
No.
You don't apologize. But what if you won one last game and we're 9-8 instead of 10-7? You go 4-5 against teams with winning records instead of 1-8. And 2 of the wins are at Kansas City, and dare I say, at Philly. And we're coming in here like on Monday, like the Broncos just went into Philly and won. The Broncos went into Kansas City and won.
But to me, it's like that's fine and dandy, and that's great. But if it doesn't lead up to us getting to the playoffs, why did we do it? Just to say we did it? While Philly still goes to the playoffs and why the Chiefs still go to the playoffs? Like, who cares then? Like, oh, we beat the Kansas City Chiefs, but did it matter enough for us to get into the playoffs? Because this is what it's all about, is winning games.
So just to be clear, and I'm playing devil's advocate here.
No, for sure.
You would take a season like this one where you were 1-8 against teams with a winning record and finished with a 10-7 record in the playoffs, as opposed to 9-8. And most people are going to agree with you, but I'm just playing devil's advocate. 9-8, much more believable, knocking off legit opponents. And it's a baby step back.
You don't even believe what you're trying to explain to me.
It's a baby step back, but it could represent a quantum leap moving forward.
How is it going to represent a leap moving forward? Because every single year it's a different year. Different players. Players are moving around the league every single year, so it's going to be a different year. Give me the team that if we only beat one team with a winning record, but we get back to the playoffs, give me that team. I don't care. Their problems, the other team's problems are not our problems. Be better. Beat us. Everybody has a chance to beat each other. Be the team to beat us. And for the Denver Broncos, if that team is not better than you, then you better spank their ass. That's all I care about, Zach, is wins. And how do you win? Having the quarterback, having the defense, having the coaching staff, and having players that are buying in and winning games. That's all I care about.
In terms of going back to the exercise at ESPN and CBS Sports, and again, if you're just joining us, the reason we're having these conversations is because both of those outlets isolated the Broncos as a prime candidate to take a step back after overachieving in 2024. Forget injury, because you could say that for every team.
Yeah.
What would be the reasons if the Broncos did take a step back?
Three reasons right here. Defense takes a huge step back. They're not in top 10. Now they're like top 15. They're giving up points. All right. A lot more points than they were this year. Number 2, we don't have a run game. If we can't find a run game this year, we're going to be in trouble. We know that we can win certain games against teams that we're better than. But you need a run game if you're going to be consistent in this league. And if you're going to make some kind of noise in the playoffs, Zach, you need a running back. I know you hate them, but you need them.
I love my running backs as long as they're for the right price.
Hey, I feel you. You need a running game. And number 3, special teams. I know it's not sexy. I know people don't like me talking about it. But we were a top 10 special team unit last year. That helps you out. It pins teams their backs against the wall. It puts us in great field position. We win games because of the field goal kicker. We have to be top 10 again to help Bo Nix out, to help the offense out, and to especially help the defense out. If you can have those if those 3 things go wrong for you or right for you, it can decide whether you're in the playoffs or you're sitting at home with you and I.
And that's figuring out the run game.
Figuring out the run game.
As long as the defense doesn't take a major step back.
Correct.
And if your special teams goes to crap.
Yes.
Okay. I don't hate it.
What do you have?
Well, I didn't make a list like that. But in terms of what would be the reasons for a step back, a just organic sophomore slump from Bo Nix that we just saw from C.J. Stroud.
Huge blow.
Like we've seen this happen through the course of NFL football. It can happen. The defense does.
Oh, you're warming up to the defense.
No, I'm not going to say. No, I was going to say scares me a little bit because, but scares is not the right word. I just question a little bit just how far above your head did you play this year? Because the longer the games kept on going on, they really took a huge drop off in at the end of the year. So did some stuff get figured out from Vance Joseph's defense? And I think that it can happen. I'll give you a recent example. 2 years ago, the offense in Houston was just way better than it was this past year. It was the same play caller in, who is it there? Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator for Houston.
Yeah, he was there.
But you're hearing from some NFL people, some whispers of like the stuff that they were doing, it got figured out. And again.
No, I agree with you. Like Vance has to be more detailed with his play calling, come up with blitz packages that someone like Spagnola, right? It's a defensive coordinator like that, which keeps you on your heels, or keeps you on your toes, I should say, where it's like, man, what are they going to do? When are they bringing this blitz? VJ has to become that kind of defensive coordinator, and he should. Year 3, you should be comfortable with your players, but I agree with you. If you go out there with the bland play calling and the blitz packages that people can pick up, it's going to be a rough year for you. But you could say that for the offense as well, Zach. I mean, the offense was playing over their head with the talent. Let's be real. You had Vele, you had Troy Franklin, Cortland Sutton, and Marvin Mims, who came along in Week 10. That's not like
You're saying Mims came along in Week 10.
Marvin Mims came along in Week 10.
Yes.
And a rookie quarterback.
Yep.
So, but we still did really, really good. So I feel like the team as a whole played above their head.
Yeah. Well, to go back to what you said initially, even if the defense takes a bit of a step back, you're taking a step back from one of the best in the league. So maybe they can go from the league's 3rd best defense to the 8th best defense, but your offense can go from 16, 17 to number 9.
Yeah.
And maybe you're both living inside the top 10, both offensively and defensively.
You balance each other out.
And the special teams, you brought it up, Broncos were top 10 special teams. So, and apparently Darren Rizzi, this guy's got the goods. You got your continuity from New Orleans, all that. If you can have 3 units, even if you're 8, 9, 10, but all living in the top 10, the Broncos will be back in the playoffs. But, again, each fan is going to have their own take on this in terms of what would actually quantify as a step forward versus step back. Because I'm one of these weirdos. I do think there's a scenario where you could lose maybe one less game than you did this year.
So you win 9.
You win 9, but you're a winning team, but you are having more signature wins or a more believable team, big picture. I don't mean that as an insult, but when you go 1-8 against teams with winning records.
Well, I feel like you're insulting them.
No.
Yeah.
No. That's a statistical fact. It's not even an opinion.
But also, that's not their, you lose more than you win in this league. Majority of the teams out there are going to lose more than they win. That's just a fact.
What do you mean?
How many teams end up making the playoffs?
14.
That means the rest of them didn't do good enough to win.
But you can still have a winning record and miss the playoffs.
Yeah, you can still have a winning record and miss the playoffs, but that's something that, do you want to mess with? Do you want to mess with that? I'd rather be the team that beats up on the sorry teams, goes and wins 10 games than 9-8 and miss that because you end up being a failure. It's about playoff wins. It's about getting to the playoffs.
But if you're 1-8 against teams with a winning record, and you lose 31-7 in the first round, I think there's, again, I'm not really disagreeing with you because at the end of the day, give me the 10-win playoff season regardless of how it comes. But I do think there's a scenario, a space between where the Broncos go 9-8 instead of 10-7 and are more believable. They're a more believable playoff team, that they did some stuff in the regular season that would lead you to believe that they can win a playoff game. Because when you go 1-8 against teams that are winners, you're crossing your fingers when you do get to the playoffs that you don't get absolutely dominated, which is what we saw this year.
Well, they're only going to be a believable team if they win this year anyway. Because if they don't win this year, everybody's going to say,